Love Your Work is supported in part by Treehouse. Take your career to the next level and learn from over 1,000 videos created by expert teachers on web design, coding, business, and much more. Claim your 14-day free trial at cadavy.net/treehouse. You'll be supporting the show. This is Love Your Work. On this show, we introduce you to the people and give you the tools to carve out success by your own definition. I'm David Cadavy, and I'm a best-selling author and entrepreneur. Every Thursday, I love bringing you a new episode in which I dissect the unique path of a guest, what clues help them find their calling, how do they cut out the noise to focus, and where have they made compromises. Or I bring you lessons that I've learned for myself. If this is your first time listening, be sure to check out some of our most popular episodes. Jason Fried on episode 1, neuroscientist John Cunios on episode 8, Laura Roeder on episode 9. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and write a review. Just go to cadavy.net/review. I work unreasonably hard bringing this show to you, and when you subscribe and review, it will help me keep doing that for you. Thanks, as always, to those of you who have been subscribing, reviewing, and sharing. We have beat our single-day download record 3 weeks in a row. Let's see if we can make it 4 with this one. So if you've already subscribed, stay subscribed. We have Ryan Holiday coming up June 23rd. You can pre-order his new book, Ego is the Enemy, at cadavy.net/ego. Now, if the quality of the show has anything to do with whether we're going to beat that download record again, we should have no problem. This show is absolutely packed with deep psychological keys to making a book a success. Tucker Max is best known as a self-proclaimed asshole. He has written 3 #1 New York Times bestsellers, including I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. He is only the 3rd writer ever to have 3 books on the nonfiction bestseller list at the same time. Tucker is a book marketing genius, and it shows in this interview. Since I've been trying to crack the positioning code for a new book lately, it was such a privilege to get Tucker's insights on what makes a book successful. As Tucker will dissect for us, there's a big difference psychologically between an article someone will click on and read on the web and a book that they will dig into their pockets and actually pay for or recommend to their friends. It's absolutely essential to understand this if you plan on writing a book. By the way, this psychology is relevant to the conversation I had on episode 21 with Nir Eyal. Just think about how differently Facebook would be designed if you were paying for it. Anyway, Tucker is using his book marketing Jedi-Mind tricks to run a really exciting new business called Book in a Box. What they do is they help you take your knowledge and turn it into a book. Now, it's not ghostwriting. We're going to get into that in the interview. It's actually taking that knowledge, making it into a digestible package known as a book. Amongst many things, Tucker will dissect for us the difference between a good clickbait title and a good book title, how to feel fulfilled in your life to break free of social media, and how Hillary and Trump brilliantly flip the frame on each other. And in case you couldn't tell by now, this episode is more not safe for work than usual.
This is a fucking disaster.
Enjoy it with your headphones on.
Man, I've lived my life so I don't have to do those things.
Love Your Work is supported in part by Audible. You can try Audible for free at cadavy.net/audible. Try Tucker Max's Mate, Become the Man Women Want, or if that's not what you're into, choose from over 180,000 audiobooks on literally any other subject that you can imagine. Go to cadavy.net/audible and claim your free audiobook. I'm here with Tucker Max from Book in a Box. And Tucker, Book in a Box, it sounds to me like the way this works, I just pay you some money and then you write a book for me and I get to put my name on it. Is that how that works?
No, that's ghostwriting. That's different.
Oh, okay.
Ghostwriting is here's my money, write a book, and I put my name on it. We actually can't take people, the one set of people, other than assholes we won't work with, but the one person that we can't work with is someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. Our process doesn't work.
Hmm. So then, how does the process work in that case? If somebody, so I
So,
do know what I'm talking about. Let's say I don't want to write a book, but I want to have a book written. Is that how
right,
it
right,
works?
right. Well, it's not that you don't want. We don't we consider the author as the author of the book. All that we consider ourselves as is basically the translator. So we
Yeah.
are translating your idea into a book, but it is your idea, it's your words, it's your voice. We're adding no content. We're just getting your words and thoughts into a book that is professionally published and that reads and flows smoothly on the page.
Hmm. And so this is kind of sounds like it's kind of for people who they have the knowledge to write a book, but they, for whatever reason, they aren't writing the book itself. Like, is this kind of cheating in some way? Is that
Cheating what? How? How would it
cheating
be
in
cheating?
terms of like, I think there's probably a lot of people out there who think like, well, you got to write the book. You have to actually write the book yourself to write a book. Um,
But when you say write, what do you mean? Do you mean you actually have to have your fingers on the keyboard, or
you
they
know,
have to be your
I think there
ideas?
might be some people who feel that way that you have to have your fingers on the keyboard to write
Well,
the
okay,
book.
no,
So,
well, let's
what do you say
unpack
to
that
those
for a
people?
second.
Yeah,
Well, I say, okay, it's very simple. If you think the only valid way to have your words in print is to put them there through a keyboard, then my question to you would be, do you hold Socrates to the standard? Because he didn't write anything down.
right,
Plato did. Do you hold Jesus to the standard? Because he didn't write anything down. The apostles did. Do you hold Buddha to this standard? Do you hold Malcolm X to this standard? Do you hold Winston Churchill to this standard? Of course you don't. And those are the greatest minds in Western history. And all of them had other people actually write or type out their words. They were the thinkers, though, fully of their thoughts, but they were not the scribes. Like what you're
right.
talking about there are scribes. And I think a scribe is a very different thing. Now, if you're saying the thoughts have to be yours, I totally agree. That's why I think ghost like go that if there's cheating anywhere, it's ghostwriting. Ghostwriting
Right.
is where someone writes their version of your book. That I think you can make a legitimate argument that that's cheating, depending on how the ghostwriter works and how much you actually know about the subject, etc. But there's no way to cheat our system because we're just translating your ideas and words. We tell our authors this. If you have stupid ideas, we will do a really professionally published book of stupid ideas. If you have great ideas, you'll get a great book. It's garbage in, garbage out, gold in, gold out.
So, what is the type of person that might want to use Book in a Box to get their book out?
Right. So our authors, the last person who wants to use this is a writer. If you consider yourself like a writer, like I like to sit and type my words out, we're not you don't want to work with us. But anyone else who has something to say, who's professional, intelligent, who gets paid for their ideas or thoughts, but doesn't want to spend 1,000 to 2,000 hours at a computer typing their words out, they're a perfect client. So, for example, CEO, we've done a couple of Fortune 500 CEOs and a lot of CEOs, smaller companies or C-level executives, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of consultants and coaches, a lot of professionals like lawyers, doctors, that type, a lot of small business owners, which are kind of the same as entrepreneur, a lot of thought leader types, people who kind of make money off their ideas, which kind of overlaps with consultant a little bit or coach, but not always. Pretty much anyone who has something to say who doesn't want to self-identify or doesn't want to spend the time at their keyboard.
Yeah, this makes sense for there was a guest that we had earlier. You might know him, Manish Sethi from
I
Pavlok.
know Manish. I know
Yeah,
Manish very well. He
yeah,
pitched me
right.
on his company.
Oh yeah, when you talk to the guy, he is super scatterbrained, and he's totally aware of that, obviously. But he sort of found his superpower in just having assistants that he said things to, and then they go and do it. So it sounds like a personality like that might be the right type of
Those are,
personality for
we
something
have
like
a
Book.
lot of those people, man. Like dyslexics. Most entrepreneurs are either dyslexic or have ADD or some other issue like that, where they did not do well in the sort of school setting, but they excelled in other settings. That's a huge portion of our clients. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're sort of able to extract the knowledge that this person has and put it into this package that a person can digest.
Yep.
So
A book. I mean, what a book is, a nonfiction book especially, should be a good one, should be like a complete exploration of one central idea, right? And so I'll give you a great example. We just did a book called The Hidden Curriculum by Dr. David Kashmer. And the book is essentially, apparently, I didn't know this. In med school, they don't teach doctors anything about the business of being a doctor, like how to get jobs, how to run your career, nothing like this at all, which seems pretty foundational to me, but they don't teach them any of this. Dr. Kashmer has been a surgeon for 30 years, and apparently there's three main tracks you take as a surgeon. He's done all three, so he wrote a book explaining essentially the subtitles like how a surgeon can run their career or something like that. And it totally goes through each track, what you have to know, who to talk to, how to get the jobs, what to be worried about, whatever. And the thing is doing amazing. Obviously, only with surgeons and doctors, no one else. But for those people, it's incredible. So what the process really does is it takes important, valuable knowledge and wisdom out of people's heads, and it gets it into a book. And our job is to be experts at books. Like we are experts at taking ideas, refining, like understanding exactly what the book idea is in your head, who your audience is, how you need to reach them, how to position the book, how to structure it, how to outline it, all that kind of stuff. It's not the author's job to worry about that. It's only their job to know what it is they're talking about, and then we will make sure it is in the book the best way possible.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is great because a book really, it's like writing is telepathy. That's what Stephen King said in his little on writing book. I thought that was like such a great thing, and I think and you have a book, an ebook that basically has the whole book in a box process. You talk about this. It was just like
Yeah.
you're taking the idea from a brain, you're putting it into a book, and then other brains can take that book and then put it in their brain and mix it up with all the other thoughts and all the magic happens that way.
Right. There's an idea, somehow in the 20th century, we got this idea that writing was some mystical, magical art that only certain ordained people could do. It's total nonsense. It's total BS. I don't believe that at all. There is a process to writing, and that process can be broken down, and it can be systematized. Now, I'm not sure. To me, the magic comes in thinking. That like if
Mm-hmm.
you are so brilliant and you can make connections in different areas, that's the definition of genius. To be able to the ability to see connections that no one else can see, not the ability to write them. Writing is an artisan skill, just like painting is an artisan skill. Being a painter is a different thing than painting, but painting is an artisan skill. Like any decent painter can rip off a Van Gogh perfectly well. I mean, there's all kinds of forgers,
Yeah.
right? So the point is the actual skill of putting paint on a canvas is not what's hard. It's envisioning something new or different, right?
Yeah.
Being the first one to do a Van Gogh is what's hard, not being the second. So that's really what we're doing is we're enabling people to utilize artisan skills that don't have anything to do with their ideas. Dr. Kashmer doesn't need to learn how to be a writer to teach other surgeons about their careers. That's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. So why should he? He can hire writers who are very skilled, who have great process, who can take his ideas and write them properly, structure and write them properly in a book so they can serve their actual purpose. Now, if Dr. Kashmer really wants to move the world through his writing, through constructing beautiful sentences and all that kind of stuff, then he's got to go learn how to be a writer. Just like if you want your house painted, you hire a different person than if you want to paint a masterpiece. Then you've got to do that yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is where it seems like there's almost a catch-22 behind getting books out there for a lot of people, and that you've got to dedicate your life into acquiring this certain body of knowledge or this certain skill. And then there's this whole other skill of writing that is so difficult to tackle. I mean, myself, I was sort of lucky. I was a designer, and then it turned out that I was a decent enough writer that I could write a book about design as well. But otherwise, it would all be locked up. There would be no way to get it out.
Well, dude, think of how many designers you know who are way better designers than you are, but can't write at all. And so you probably
Oh,
are
there,
higher
yeah,
status.
definitely.
Well, like, not to put you down, but that's not. How is that fair? That doesn't make sense.
You're
You
absolutely
know?
right, Tucker. Actually, people come to me. I don't even do freelance work, and people come to me with freelance jobs, and they want me to use some sort of new technology or something, and I'm like, look, I don't even do this anymore. I just write about it now.
Well, think about how crazy. It's the same thing. It's true for me, man. I spent my 20s doing what every guy does. I got drunk. I threw up on myself. I fell down. I acted like an idiot. I hooked up with girls. And I did not have the greatest stories, and I was not the best storyteller. I was just the guy who took the time and effort to learn how to become a writer so I could write those down. It almost seems crazy to me that I'm famous for my books because I have at least 4 or 5 friends, direct friends in my circle, who have way better stories, who are
Hmm.
way funnier than me. And it's like when we all get together, they all break my balls because they're like, "You're not even the funniest dude in our group.
Maybe
How
you
did
should
you
pull a
become the guy?"
maybe you should pull a Jay Peterman from Seinfeld, like buying the stories from
Steal their
Kramer.
stories. Well, I mean, what I did was I just wrote them into my books, you know? So, like, my one friend in my books, his name in the books is Sling Blade. He's the funniest person I've ever met. If I told my fans his job, they'd freak out. They wouldn't believe what he actually does. But I just like wrote what, so I get credit for his humor because it's in my book, even though he's the one who said all these
Hmm.
things. But like, yeah, it's just, it doesn't make sense that great talent in certain fields has to be held behind this paywall of skills that has nothing to do with the talent.
Yeah,
It doesn't make sense. And
yeah,
that's all we're doing is taking friction from here to here. It's exactly what the iPhone did to photography, man.
right.
Exactly. Like think about what it used to be, what you used to have to do to become a photographer. Like fucking lenses and dark rooms. You had to develop film like with chemicals. Like people under 25 look at me when I talk about dark rooms like I'm a lunatic. Like they can't believe that this ever existed.
I did some darkroom photography. I remember I'd go spend 3 hours in a darkroom with literally nothing. I would have nothing to show for it. Everything would have turned out wrong. 3 hours just to find out
People
whether the picture I took 3 weeks ago turned out right or not.
think about how insane that is. Would anyone argue, oh, no, no, we shouldn't have iPhone photography because there's a special magic to darkrooms? Shut the fuck up! That's nonsense. I have more pictures of my 18-month-old son on this device than have been taken of me probably in my entire life. That's a great thing. That's amazing. How is that not good? That's incredible. Now, most of the pictures are dog shit, of course, but I take so many that I actually, like, if you take the top 1% of my pictures of him, you might think I'm a good photographer.
Hmm.
I'm not. I just take so many pictures that, like, the best ones kind of, I luck in the good ones, you know?
Yeah,
And I think it's same thing's true with knowledge and wisdom. Like, a lot of people know a few things that are very important, and very few of them put it into books because of the friction. Well, we're going to reduce the friction and get all of this unlock this knowledge and wisdom ideas out of people's heads and out into the world.
yeah. And I read your entire ebook about the process because this is really interesting to me because interestingly enough, I am a published author and I'm trying to become an author. Again, like trying to write another book, but I'm realizing how little I actually know about writing books because I stumbled upon the last one so
Yeah.
much. So there was really interesting stuff in there about the positioning of a book. And it's interesting to me how there's sort of there's things that there's articles people will click on and there's information people will read, but a successful book has doesn't necessarily share qualities with something like that? What are the elements of a successful book?
So that's a good question. When people are looking for a book, they're generally looking for like the expert or the authority, and they generally want to dive deeply into some subject, right? Even if it's a small niche, narrow subject, what people are looking for is the person that knows what they're talking about, so they can tell them. Whereas when you're reading a blog post, it's normally like, how do I put my meta tags on this page, on this website? Like, you don't want to learn everything on the world about SEO. You're just trying to figure out a piece of information. Like, that's where Google has done amazing, and that's where the internet has gotten really good, is propagating information, small one-off pieces of information. A book is different in that it is an exploration of a full idea and a full explanation. It's the difference between having a few carrots as a snack and a 12-course meal. Neither one is right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're just totally, totally different. And by the way, you don't want everything you eat to be one or the other. Sometimes you want snacks. Sometimes you want a big, awesome sit-down meal. But they're different things and they meet different needs. And so I think really what books are about deeply understanding topics that matter to that person. For nonfiction, it's definitely about ROI. Mm-hmm. I'm only talking about nonfiction. For fiction, I think it's about storytelling. And like novels are all about entertainment and escapism through storytelling.
Yeah. And what about some of the deeper psychology of what makes somebody want to share a book with someone?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's a lot of research that's been done about this by Jonah Berger and a bunch of other people. So here's what happens essentially. The reason any of us share anything is essentially for two reasons, and they're very tightly related. One is to tell the world something about us, and the other is to tell ourselves something about us, right? So it's essentially to tell ourselves a story, or it's this is kind of related to tell the world something about us, but it's essentially a status negotiation, right? So if you and I are friends and you said something about, oh man, I just suck at meditation, I tried it, but it doesn't work, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to recommend The Trauma of Everyday Life to you, for example, which is a book sort of about meditation. And the reason I'm going to recommend it is, one, because I probably want to help you, but also two, because it makes me look good. It puts me in a position of power and of high status to be the knowledgeable one who can tell you something, right? That helps you and that matters to you. So like, that's a big, big deal. It's essentially about status negotiation or about assistance, one or the other, right? And that's telling stories about yourself to the world or about yourself. I'm a good person that helps people. I'm a smart person that knows things, right? So that's why positioning of your book is so important. If your title is something that is really hard to say, like a weird word, people aren't going to say it out loud. It makes them feel stupid. If your title is something that sounds ridiculous, like How to Rape Babies, no one's ever going to recommend the book, even if it's an amazing book, because no one wants to say out loud they read a book about raping babies. We were talking about Ryan before. Ryan actually had this problem with his first book. He called
Ryan
it
Holiday.
Trust Me, I'm Lying. Yeah.
Yeah.
He called it Trust Me, I'm Lying. And
it's a great book.
It's a fantastic book. But the title, the subtitle was Confessions of a Media Manipulator. That should have been the main title. That's actually what he wanted as the main title, and the publisher didn't like it. And Trust Me, I'm Lying was bad because when you say it out loud, you're saying I'm a liar. Like, trust me, I'm lying. It's
Who
hard
wants to
for
say
people...
that to their friends? Like, read this book. Trust me, I'm lying.
Right. It sounds weird. Like, the first thing you have to say is, no, but I know it's a weird title, but it's really good. Like, a friend of mine has a book, Cameron Harold. He's the best. He's my CEO coach. He's an amazing, brilliant dude. And he wrote a book called Double Double. And it's the dumbest fucking title. Because a Double Double is a cheeseburger from In-N-Out. And like, every time I recommend his book, I have to say, the book's called Double Double, but ignore the title. I know it's In-N-Out. It's a really good book.
How do you describe the book then? What do you say? to
I
your
say it's
friends?
the only book because it is. It's the only book I know of in existence that gives a true actionable operational guide on how a CEO should scale a company, how to go from 1 to 10.
Gotcha.
There's no other book that's really like that.
Yeah.
Every book is sort of like, big business leader type. So it's like how to run a massive international conglomerate, or it's like entrepreneur, how to start a company, how to find product market fit, lean startup type stuff. There's nothing really good about once you have product market fit, how do you build and scale your company till it
Yeah.
gets to the point, like where it's a massive, where you can start applying business school logic to it. It's a fantastic book, and he's actually a client of ours at Book in a Box,
Hmm.
and we've done 3 other books with him. But the point is that title is stupid. Double double is a cheeseburger,
Hmm.
and he's like I've been in his ear for a year to republish the book and change the title because it's so hard to recommend.
Well,
You know,
I think there's like a continuum of abstractness that titles or naming of anything can perform upon. So like, yeah, a clickbait article that is first, yeah, I killed this baby, and then this is what you won't believe what happened next. Like that gets people's attention. But if you put a book on a shelf and ask for $15 for something like that,
it's
it,
totally
it,
different.
it wouldn't work. Same sort of thing with podcasts. It, it's good to have a podcast. It's like, okay, this is the passive revenue podcast. You know exactly what it's about. Now, if you're NPR and you have like something you can push out into the world, then you can start to be more abstract. You know.
Right.
So
Once you have an audience, then right, exactly.
yeah.
They've given you enough time to build something like Serial. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and when you talk about titles, it makes me think about there's a great book about social connections by a researcher named John Cassiopo. It's called Loneliness, and I always hate recommending it to people because you read a book called Loneliness.
Right. What kind of loser are you? You're lonely?
It
Right, exactly.
even says in the book that he was like reading his own book on the plane, and he was trying to cover up the cover of his own book because it had the wrong name, but apparently he still went with that name.
Well, I mean, most authors are bad marketers.
Yeah. And as far as sharing books, I know that I saw something interesting in your ebook that resonated with me. It was something about like looking smart at a party. Now, I know when I wrote Design for Hackers, this was actually one of the things that I thought in my brain was like, oh, how can I make the person who's reading this look smart at a party? And then somebody emailed me once and they're like, I love your book. It makes me look smart at a party. I'm like, what? Who told you to say that to me?
No, that's a great test I talk about is imagine someone you don't know saying you're talking to someone else you don't know, both of whom are in your target audience. How are they going to talk? Imagine one saying your book out loud, your book title, and then imagine what are they going to say about it? Like, how are they going to describe the book?
Hmm.
Um, and if you don't nail that, you need to feed those words to people. So like the War of Art. Oh, what a cool title, right?
Yeah.
Things like that, like the School of Greatness. Oh, okay, all right, I get that makes sense. Um, you kind of like a good title should sound good. It should let people know who it's for, and should give at least some idea what it's about.
Hmm.
And then it should sound cool to say because then people will say it, right? And then you should also make sure that if the subtitle, if possible, should clearly describe the book, and if it does, that's how people will describe it. What's
Hmm.
School of Greatness about? Oh, it's how to like have the most amazing life ever. Like Lewis Howes did all this cool stuff. You should totally read it. Whatever. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
And I think it's great if a title kind of has a couple of different uses or ways to be interpreted that tie together. Like the War of Art, like obviously it's a play on the art of war, but it really is about the War of Art. It's about fighting the resistance, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yep.
So yeah, that positioning is that's like the most critical part of the whole process, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's funny because we don't really talk about this to our like we don't sell this as a value that well because most people don't get this. But it's probably the most valuable thing we do at Book in a Box is we have a very precise positioning process. And most authors don't do this. They come up with a book idea and then they just write the book without understanding where does the book fit in the market. And
Mm-hmm.
so what they end up doing is they think they can just write a book and then go market it, but that's not how it works. Once you decide what the book is about, then you've already made a whole series of marketing decisions that you cannot reverse later on. But early on, if you think about because the same book, the same content can be positioned multiple ways or can be slightly tweaked and positioned multiple ways. And it can fundamentally change how you market the book and how successful the book is. I'll give you an amazing example. There was a book that came out, I think it came out like whatever, 1975, called Astrological Love. It didn't sell at all. It went out of print. Someone really smart read it, bought the rights to it, took the exact same book, renamed it How to Make Love to a Woman and Get Her to Come Back for More Every Time. And it became like one of the best-selling books of the 70s and 80s.
Wow.
Same
That's
book.
amazing.
Same book. Right? And so it's not just titling though, because that already had good content. They might have changed chapter titles, but it was basically the exact same book. And so what we do with our clients is we understand positioning doesn't start with your book idea. It starts with what result are you trying to achieve with this book? Not what do you hope happens? What result must you get for this book to be successful? Like, I have to get 10 clients, or I have to get invited to speak at 3 conferences or whatever. But like if you say, oh, I have to sell 1 million copies and be a best-selling author, you're an idiot. That's even people who have sold millions of books like me don't ever expect that to happen with every book. That's nonsense, right?
It has to be
So
an
you need to,
accident, kind of.
yeah, really, you got to have the right message at the right time, and you've got to get lucky. All of those things. Which this is why I sold a lot of books. I had the right message at the right time, and I got lucky, and that was it. And it was a good book. In addition to all that, you've got to also do a good book. That good book is just table stakes. So first, what result must you get? Then by knowing what result you must get, then you can understand what audience you have to reach to get that result, right? And the deeper and more niche you can go, the better. Like if you say, oh, my audience is everybody, you're a moron. Nobody's book audience is everybody, not even the Bible. Or if you say like women, that's not an audience, but like women aged 25 to 35 who want to start a business, that's an audience, right? And even that's kind of broad, but at least that's specific enough where you can start looking at that as a niche. Then you want to, third thing for positioning to ask yourself is, what do I know that is interesting and valuable to that audience? If you don't know anything that's interesting and valuable to the audience you need to reach, you probably don't have a book in you that's going to get you anything. But if you do, then that should be what your book is about. So for example, if I deeply understand all the fears and problems and obstacles that women aged 25 to 35 have in starting a business, then I should be writing that book, right? Because a lot of women in that age group want to start a business, and there's obstacles and fears and things they need to get past. So it makes sense. I personally don't know jack shit about that for women specifically, so I shouldn't write a book for them because I have nothing to add, and so it probably won't. It's a waste of my time.
We're going to take a quick break. Being productive is about mind management, not time management. I want to have all of my mental energy free to be creative and keep making great stuff. That's why I use ActiveCampaign for my email marketing. With ActiveCampaign, I can make super sophisticated automations. With my old ESP, I lost all my mental energy trying to simplify my email marketing to fit whatever arcane restrictions they had. With ActiveCampaign, I can build automations that do just about anything. So for example, I just relaunched my email course, Summer of Design, and it's free only through June 20th. Now I already have my automation set up to change the way the course will work once I start charging for it. It was easy. With ActiveCampaign, I can build my automations in an intuitive drag and drop interface. What I see is what I get. ActiveCampaign is offering a 14-day free trial to Love Your Work listeners. Just go to cadavy.net/activecampaign. That's 14 days free at cadavy.net/activecampaign. You don't even need a credit card. This positioning process is so important. I actually recently spent 3 months where like the only thing I was working on was writing a book proposal for this book idea, and it's just I haven't hit it. And in fact, towards the end of the book proposal writing process, I discovered another book that was like the exact same book. So that happens. It's called Deep Work by Cal Newport, by the way. It's a pretty good
Oh,
book.
that's a great book. It's a
He
great
uses the
book.
same examples and everything. So I've been like trying to find my angle on that sort of thing. Um, and so actually in the process of doing that, one thing I'm doing is just riffing on ideas and trying to recreate, just to give some background on what happened with me in my first book. Was I just had some stuff that went viral on the internet, and then I got a book deal, right? Do you ever see stuff where that doesn't work, where something that does well on the internet doesn't sell, or something that doesn't do well on the internet does sell?
Yeah, of course. I'll give you a great example. There was a book called Everything I Know About Love, Life, and Marriage I Learned from Shamu. It was based on a New York Times article that was the most shared New York Times article over like a 3-year period.
Hmm.
Like this New York Times reporter went to SeaWorld and trained with the big animal trainers and figured out how they train animals, right? Because you can't uh, make a whale do something, right? So how do you train a killer whale? And basically, they ignore the negative things and they reward the behaviors they want, right? And which is not exactly the same as operant or classical conditioning. It's slightly different, but there's some details. But it's a pretty powerful idea: is to ignore things you don't want and reward what you do. And so she went home and tried this on her husband, and it worked, and whatever. And so this article blew up, and she got a book deal. And I liked the article, and I bought the book thinking, oh, this is cool. She's going to really dive deep in this. It was fucking terrible. The book was literally her article with a bunch of fluff stuffed in.
Oh,
It
okay.
drove me nuts, and the
So it
book
was
didn't
actually
do
a
well.
bad book, though.
Well, but here the book didn't sell.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like aside from my opinion, like the book did not sell because I think because she did such a bad job, right? First off, the title is stupid. That title, by the it's a great example of what you were talking about before. That's a great clickbait title. It's a terrible book title,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't in any way convey authority or expertise or ROI. Whereas the people aren't looking for usually ROI on clickbait. They're looking for they're responding to an emotional reaction.
Yes.
People don't buy books emotionally. They buy books for ROI. They think they're going to get something. Like even if it doesn't have to be monetary, it can just be whatever. Um, emotional or whatever. They're buying it for an ROI reason. And so she used the exact same article in different medium. Didn't work.
Hmm. Yeah, an
That's a
example of
great
somebody,
example.
an example of somebody who I think probably had a little more success was Nicholas Carr, who I think he wrote an article something like, "Is Google making us stupid? Is Google making us dumb?" And then he went
But
on
the
to write
book
the
title was different,
Shallows.
though.
The book
Yes,
title
The
was The
Shallows.
Shallows.
It's a
It's a little
great
more
title.
abstract, and he
Yes.
probably had
But the
like lots
subtitle
of
was what was the
press and
subtitle? It was How the Internet is Making Us Stupid.
something like that. Yeah,
Pretty
something
sure
like
it
that.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Do,
see,
do.
also Nick, uh, I, yeah, what the internet, no, what the internet is doing to our brains, even better.
Hmm. What
Yeah,
it's doing? Yeah.
yeah. So, but here's the thing with Nicholas Carr is that Nicholas is, he didn't. I read that book. He didn't. It wasn't just his article, right? And in fact,
Hmm.
it was the other way around. He
Oh
knew
yeah.
he was.
Right.
He
It's
knew he
very
was
deep.
going to write that book, and so he excerpted the book in various articles. Like Malcolm Gladwell does the same thing.
Hmm.
He did the same thing with a couple of his books, not all of them. Some of them are just kind of random, like What the Dog Saw is just a bunch of random anecdotes, whatever, anecdotal stories. Um,
So
but
you're saying there's
yeah,
like various articles that make up different concepts within the book that he released as
for What the
the
Dog Saw, yeah.
it
He
approached.
released them as all one sort
Well,
of
in
book.
the case of Nicholas Carr, you were saying that. Um,
He already had his book idea. In fact, Nicholas Carr is a great example of someone who comes up with a thesis and then goes and looks for evidence to support it. instead of looking at evidence and then coming up with a thesis to explain it.
Yeah, which isn't necessarily a great way to do science, but it works fine for
Well, if
books,
you're
right?
playing to biases that people have, then it's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
And he is Nicholas Carr, or not? Yeah, he's speaking to a certain type of person who has nostalgia for an age that didn't exist, but they
Yeah.
think that there's some mystical beauty to a printed physical book that can never be replicated in any
Yeah.
way anywhere else. And those are just old people trying to fight the future.
I think there's something really interesting about that subtitle, though, what the internet is doing to our brains. I think it's really interesting that he decided, or whoever decided, to title it that instead of the internet is making us dumb. I mean, think about
But that's his
psychologically,
thesis. His thesis is the internet is making us dumb. He put it
but
that
think
way to make it seem
psychologically.
objective. Yeah.
Well, also think about somebody tell what is the internet doing to our brains, something like that. It's vague. It's not saying what the internet is doing to our brains, but if a person has a preconceived notion about it, it ignites that. But there's something maybe that would seem sanctimonious about it, saying that why the internet's making us
Well,
dumb, perhaps.
what it really is an unclosed loop. So what the internet is doing to our brains is a question that begs the answer. So you pick up the book. The internet is making us stupid is the declaration. And so like if you agree, you might buy the book to reinforce what you know. If you disagree, you're going to ignore the book.
Hmm.
By leaving it as an unclosed loop, he gets both sides.
Yeah.
In.
Yeah, and I was reading a little bit about this, or I noticed some of this psychology of naming a book or sort of the posture of a book in researching book proposals. I'm not going to say which book proposal I saw it in, but there was one where they were saying, well, there's just one class of books which is basically you're fat and it's not your fault,
Right.
and that people find comfort in maybe a book that will make them feel like something that is
They're
undesirable
buying
to them
guilt
is not their
reduction.
right.
Yeah, they're buying guilt reduction.
Are there any other categories such as that that you have on top of your brain of why people buy
Well,
books?
there's the get off my lawn
Mm,
sort of category, which are like all the old people. Like there's like the conservative old people who are like, get off my lawn, everything's bad now, and it used to be great. And then there's like the
the
liberal
world is
old
ending. Yeah.
people, which right, which are like, no, 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 they're not. No, there's very few people who say everything's great now. There's basically Matt Ridley is the only one,
Well,
maybe in
actually,
Robert Wright,
to
but
contrast
like,
with sorry to interrupt, but to contrast with The Shallows, it just made me think about um, Clive Thompson's Smarter Than You Think, which is basically it talks about how technology is making us smarter.
yeah, no, I haven't read
And I
that
don't,
book.
it
Those
probably
are
for,
rare. That's a small niche, dude.
and
There are
I
not.
don't think that it did super well, is what I'm saying.
I haven't heard of it, so yeah, it didn't because positivity in that regard doesn't usually sell well, unfortunately. What sells well is negativity. So the conservatives take the everything used to be great, and the liberals take the we're bad people because we're racist or wrecking the environment or we hate women or whatever.
And
So
in
like
reading that or sharing an article like that, you get to say, that's not me.
right, it's identity politics.
Yeah.
That's exactly what all of that is. I mean that's the most powerful form of branding is identity, and almost all sharing that people do on the internet is about like telling the world who they are. You know,
Right.
I mean, go through your Facebook feed. Look at even if you take out the political posts. I can't believe blah 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 this. Can you believe blah blah? Oh, I love this. This is amazing. It's
Hmm.
all branding, you know?
There's always a subtext of what the person who's sharing it is saying about themselves with the sharing of it.
That's not the subtext. That's the fucking text. Yes, it's not literally. You're right, literally, but like to me, there is no subtext on Facebook. It's all text. But like the text is not the text, which I guess makes it subtext. But yeah, like it's so weird, man. Maybe because I've been actually famous, the idea that I would share things that matter to me on Facebook or any sort of social media just seems not like like I have no problem sharing shit about myself. I wrote entire books about really embarrassing shit that I've done. So that's
Hmm.
not the problem. It's just like I share the meaningful stuff in my life day to day, like with my family and my friends, like the people who matter to me, not like it's a very unusual, not unusual, it's a very common mentality. It's just like it's still kind of like one of those things where it's like I wish there was a social network that was for people who like didn't feel the need to tell the world who they were constantly.
Hmm.
You know? But the irony is it would be a totally worthless social network because no one would share shit. There'd be nothing on there except, hey, I got married, or maybe, whatever. Like there'd be like the smallest
Yeah.
things. Like it wouldn't be a social network. It would like I I don't it
I,
would almost be like I don't know what it would be.
I, I think that was an interesting, I don't know if it was a thesis that, maybe because you are already famous that there might be some part of you that doesn't need to be fed the way that people might feed themselves with these things. Do you have any insight or hypotheses about that?
I mean, well, it's yeah, like it's sort of like I'm married now, right?
Hmm.
And my wife is not okay with me sleeping with other women, so which is fairly common. So like she's the only woman I sleep with, and which is fine with me.
Hmm.
Like I have no problem with that. But I also spent like 15 years or a decade, whatever, sleeping with as many women as I could. So it's like, okay, like I've already gorged myself. Like I know exactly what's out there. I know I don't want that more than what I have, or I would go have that, right?
Right.
And I feel like that's there's a lot of that, at least for me, and for a lot of people. It's like if you don't, it's really hard to not want things. It's hard not to want things you've never had that seem
Hmm.
cool. You know what I'm
FOMO.
saying? Exactly. Like I can tell young guys that spending a decade making your entire objective to get ass, like I'm not gonna say it's wrong morally, it's not, and I'm not gonna like lecture them about it, but I can tell them it's after a while it gets boring and tedious, and it's kind of lame. It's not like there's anything bad with it. It's just there's a lot of things to do that are way more fun and way more productive and way more enjoyable and way more rewarding than like chasing more and more girls, right?
Hmm.
It's not like having sex is bad. It's just like if you've got to sleep with 3 girls a week or something. But I did it, right? So it's not like I'm not doing it from a position of judgment. I'm just saying, guys, I know what it leads to, right? And it's just not very rewarding. But I never would have that knowledge had I not gone through that. Like you never would have been able to tell me that,
Hmm.
There's no chance that 25-year-old me would ever listen to that. Be like, okay, grandpa, get out of here. I need to go to the bar and pick up some girls.
Right.
Like,
So
there's just
you can't think of anything that you could have told yourself to
because it's not
prevent that.
knowledge. It's not well because the assumption there is that it's reason and logic, which is not why your brain's making the decisions to go fuck a bunch of girls. There's no. It is
Hmm.
on a totally different level. And so like you've got to deal with it at the level it's at.
Yeah.
And the reality, I've seen this happen with a lot of people. Most people who spend a lot of time on social media do it because they either are trying to project a life they don't have but want, or they're trying to fill their life with meaning when it has none. And I mean a lot. I don't mean if you post a Facebook update every 3 times a week or something. I mean like a lot. And
This is supported by, what little research I've seen on this. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so my point is like it. The way to cure that is not talking about social networks and not talking about Facebook. It's going and building real relationships with real people. Then you don't need to you don't need to project something as a compensation for what doesn't exist, and you don't need to pretend you have something or search for something that isn't there because you already have it.
It's
You
it,
know,
it reminds me of the Rat Park experiment. Have you heard about the Rat Park experiment?
I'm not sure.
Where they basically, there used to be this idea that they'd give rats cocaine or heroin or something and a little trigger that they could push and they would just coke themselves to death. But then when somebody made a whole park full of rats where they could socialize and
Oh yeah, yeah,
everything,
yeah.
then the rats weren't getting addicted.
Well, I mean, I don't want to dive too deep into this subject because I'm not an expert on addiction, but what little I do know, it really looks to me like addiction is a disease of connection and not like, or it's a problem of connection, not a
Hmm.
disease. The disease model of addiction has
Or
never
even if you
made
were just
sense.
to call it compulsive behavior, like when you talk about having this unstoppable desire to get ass all of the time, was there any compulsion to that, or was that really just
No,
your
it was me.
desire?
It was meeting. It was a true desire, but the desire, where does the desire come from? That's the question, right? Like if you're hungry, it comes from hunger usually, right? For me, like I want to make a distinction. A man wanting to sleep with a woman is not some weird thing, but like making it your entire objective for decades and like orienting your whole life around it, it's an extreme perversion of it's a definition of promiscuity, right? Any sort of promiscuous behavior. Eating is super healthy. Eating 10 pounds of food a day is gonna make you super obese, right? So it's not eating, it's how much and why. So same thing with sex. It's not sex is bad, it's how much and why and with who. And so for me, the extreme levels of promiscuity were there with every person, whether it's a man or a woman. You're trying to fill an emotional need or meet an emotional need or a gap, fill a hole with sex. It
Hmm.
doesn't work, but sex feels great and it feels like it works for a while, so you do it, you know?
Right.
It doesn't work in the long run though.
How did you discover that that was what was happening?
Um, in my case, man, you just eventually it's like um the the emptiness and the loneliness eventually override the fun and the novelty and the physical benefits.
Right, right.
You
And
know?
then was there like a turning point or a moment of
Man, I wish I had like one cool story to tell you, and it was like at that moment I knew it was all different. It's not. It's really not. There was probably a series of things.
yeah.
I mean, I wrote about a lot of them in my books, but like I had a lot of moments where it was like, "What are you doing? Like, what is going on?" You know?
Hmm.
If there were any, what were some really big ones? Maybe the biggest was when I was in LA. I definitely wrote about this in Hilarity Ensues. I wrote about it in Assholes Finish First and Hilarity Ensues. It was a two-part story. But this girl I dated for a while, dated like whatever, 3 months, 6 months. Um, she ended up meeting an ex-girlfriend of mine, and those two became friends. And then they both came over and had a threesome with me. And it sounds like the most amazing thing that's ever happened, right? Like every guy's like, oh my God, that's like a dream. Your two ex-girlfriends uh, met and hung out independently, came over to your house for a threesome. Oh yeah, it's a fucking great the first and second time. And then the third time, it's like you remember why you broke up with both of them, except it's not just one, now it's fucking two, and it's a fucking disaster, and basically burns your entire life down. Then you realize,
Hmm.
maybe this is not worth this. This is a fucking disaster. Like it.
Do you remember the
Uh,
moment that you said that to yourself?
it was probably the time that I was trying. I wrote about this too. I was trying to hide. I was in my apartment, and they were both drunk out of their minds, banging on my door to come in. Like, come on! Like, they weren't angry. They were mad, but they were mad that I wouldn't open the door to fuck them, and I wouldn't because I had another girl in there. Because they weren't planning to come over. They just like came over, and I had another girl in my place, and I was like, "Oh God, if they find her here." Then like it wasn't even like I was afraid. It was just like I know I'm gonna have to call the cops. Like, and I just don't want to deal with a domestic violence incident, especially
Hmm.
one that what like I'm not causing. Good God fucking forbid. So I just basically told the girl. Well, I told her what happened. And she was like, "What are you fucking like?" It was the whole thing was like it sounds a total fucking disaster.
Yeah.
So I basically had to hide in my apartment and not talk and pretend I wasn't there. Um,
That will
so
do
that
it.
yeah, so that my two ex-girlfriends who wanted to have a threesome with me were banging on my door would leave.
And as far as business pursuits go, I mean, you wrote books about all of these experiences and such,
But
and now you are running this business where you're teaching people who are writing books probably a lot unlike these other books that you wrote. How did that turn happen? What?
what do you mean? What?
Well, I mean, I guess actually you have a series on your site called "Asshole to CEO."
Hmm?
Um, the blog posts, and obviously people can just go read all those posts. But uh, are there any milestones along that path?
Oh man, I mean, when I started psychoanalysis was big. When I started meditating with along with psychoanalysis was big. Just talk therapy.
Yeah.
When I met my wife was huge. I don't want to say my wife changed my life. I had changed my life and I was ready for a great woman and I met a great woman. And then I think the change accelerated once I kind of got with her. Um, when I had my son, and my son was born literally the month that Book in a Box started, which is fucking crazy.
Wow.
Crazy. I know. And my dog died. My dog of 10 years, who was like the most
Hmm.
important thing in my life, and one of my best friends. All four of those things happened in a 3 week period in August of 2014.
Yeah. So I was like
I
clean
know, like
slate.
what the right? If you believe in like crazy nonsense about the universe, that's like proof that something's going on. Um,
When all of
I
that
mean, I
was
don't,
happening,
but
were you like, oh yeah, everything's turning out all right, or it sounds like a kind
dude,
of a crisis?
my son was born July 31st, July 30th or July 31st. I should probably know. It was one of those 2 days. The last day in July, so I guess 31st. My dog died. Seth Roberts died like August, whatever, 5th, or his funeral was August 5th. My dog died August 10th, and Book in a Box blew up like the day when I went on some podcast and just blew up. We did like $200,000 in business like August 16th or something like that. It was the most whipsaw month of my life. Like it was fucking crazy, dude. It was so stressful. It was both positive and negative that it was actually I couldn't it was very dissociating. Like, I didn't even cry about my dog until 3 months later when I was meditating, and then all of a
Hmm.
sudden it all came, and it was like, holy shit. And then like, yeah, dude, it was like I just had to. Thank God I had spent 4 years in psychoanalysis, and I had a lot of tools to use to help myself, and I had a great wife, and I had a great support system around me, and I met it. I actually at the time I wasn't yeah, I was meditating. I probably wasn't meditating that month because I was too busy, but I had like a practice to go back to bring myself back down and back in, you
Having
know?
those rituals or those habits can always give you. I mean, when things are all up in the air, give you a sense of home or footing. Is that what you found?
Yeah, but it's not just habits, man. It's people. Like all these entrepreneurs want to talk all this nonsense about, oh, these four things and you can rule the world. None of them talk about relationships, and or very few. And that is the most important thing. There's
Yeah.
nothing. I mean, there's all the other things are in service of people and
Hmm.
relationships, not the results. Like we don't have habits as an end. No one's like, yep, I got four habits. My life's great. No, that's fucking stupid. You have habits so you can have better, really, whatever you want to say to get, it's to have better relationships. And if it's not, you're fucked up. If you have great habits so you can buy more shit, you have real fucking problems. You are a broken person. And it's not that buying stuff doesn't matter. I like having nice things, those are great. But I like having nice things because it means my wife and son can be more comfortable. It means, whatever. It means we have a better quality of life. But all the things I have are in service of the relationships I have with the people I love and the
Hmm.
work I do that matters to the people I love, and that's it.
Yeah, and it's like those are just kind of the hardest things to track and to see how they're affecting your happiness and well-being until you really try hard. You can like track all your nutrition and track your working out and track every decision you make in your business, but unless most people don't have the insight necessarily to say like, oh gosh, I really am feeling very productive on Monday because I had such a weekend filled with people that I enjoyed or things like that. It seems like something that people don't really pay attention to.
Yep.
So I want to be respectful of your time and wrap up some of the my kind of rapid fire questions. What's the biggest compromise that you've had to make to get where you are?
Man, I've lived my life so I don't have to do those things.
Yeah.
I've made a ton of mistakes, but almost none of them were because I compromise.
Do you think that that gives you any sort of a superpower in seeing and understanding people that it doesn't seem like you have held back on anything that you've wanted to do at any point in time. That's the impression I get anyway.
That's look, I I have created a life, so I do what I want. There's a price to pay for that. Like it's not all sunshine and kittens, but it's worth it to me, you know? Whereas other people are happy to put on their suit and tie and go to their job and pretend that they're not a corporate slave because they like the whatever comes with that. Okay, it's fine. Um, I would just say make the choice consciously, not unconsciously. Um, but no, man, I've never willingly, knowingly made a compromise, meaning a compromise in that like I compromise my principles or my values. Like there's been plenty of times where someone wants to do X and I want to do Y, and so we figure out a way in between. But that's not. I don't mean
Mm-hmm.
compromise as like um, I'm reasonable to deal with other people. I try to do that, not always successfully. But compromise to me means compromise your principles, values, things you hold dear. I won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just why the fuck get up in the morning, man?
It sounds so. It's situations where when you calculate the expected value, um, the route that you chose is better, even though there might have been something that you.
No, it's no compromise. It's about like, is this core to my being? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I'll give you some examples. In our company, how we treat clients, things like that. You know, how we treat our authors. Like I'm not going to do something that's unethical or I feel uncomfortable with because it makes us money. Like we have turned down hundreds of thousands of dollars for various reasons because it would have represented to me, right or wrong, it would have represented to me a compromise of our principles and who we are. Not okay. Not going to do it. You know, it's not worth doing if we have to do it the wrong way. I'm not even gonna. What my principles and values are almost doesn't matter in this context. Like it matters that I know what they are and that I recognize that this was a test of them, and either I've got to push them and tell myself I'm not compromising them and say, oh, well, I guess that's not a value. I guess it's over here. Or lie to myself and pretend it's not a compromise, or just don't do it. Um, so I would say the one time we've compromised has been the worst mistake we made. It was a hire, and it didn't look and feel like a compromise at the time, which is probably a good case of rationalization of me lying to myself. Like it was just like kind of like the deal terms she wanted and the way she wanted to be treated were they weren't direct challenges, they were just a little bit off. And so it didn't feel like a compromise, but it was what I should have seen it for what it was, which is a major red flag. And I didn't, and it ended up being the worst hire we've ever made, and it took us months and a lot of money to unpack it. So yeah, that was a compromise, but it was
Mm-hmm.
unintentional. I didn't realize it in the moment, and as soon as I realized it, I reversed it. But I think it's fair to call that a compromise. Yeah.
Yeah, and you hinted to this next question a little bit in that last answer. When was the time that you left money on the table, and what were you getting in exchange for leaving the money on the table?
I mean, I'll give you a very specific example. We used to take clients for publishing. Like right now, our process will start with you at the beginning with your idea and take you all the way through, and that's it. But it used to be we would do that, our full process, or just manuscript, or just publishing. And we don't do just manuscript or just publishing anymore because those clients took a lot of work and were not worth the effort. And we probably cut down our revenue this year 20 to 25% because we cut those options out. But it allowed us to focus and it allowed us to clean up our process. And so I think we're going to grow a lot more towards the end of this year and next year, and we're going to have a much better product. So 20, 25% for us means maybe $1 million.
Yeah, it'll help you focus the business though.
And be better and grow better, grow more later on, you know? So it's sacrificing now to gain later.
What's the last book that you read that changed the way you saw something?
I'm in the middle of reading one. It's called Uncommon Therapy by Jay Haley. It's about Milton Erickson and the way he approached problems. And he is very smart. The way he understands frames and stuff like that, and cognitive frames and words. It's pretty. I thought I understood all this stuff, and it turns out I didn't really understand as well as I thought.
So a frame is like something happens to you and you say, "Oh, that was good," or "That was bad."
Right, or like that's more of an orientation. A frame is like let me see. Okay. When Hillary Clinton says Donald Trump is sexist, and Donald Trump says he doesn't answer what she says. He says Hillary Clinton plays the woman card and has turned gender into a qualification for president. I thought we were past that as a culture. He totally flipped the frame on her and makes her seem sexist now. And then she intelligently reflipped the frame and said, if caring about women is blah 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 is playing the woman card, then deal me in, right? So they're both flipping the frame on each other. They're not answering each other. Whereas like when Donald Trump would clown Jeb Bush would try and answer his arguments instead of changing the frame and re-attacking Trump.
Because it's really people are just reacting to this more
Well,
emotional
as soon as you answer an acquisition, you've lost, right?
Gotcha.
Yes. We're not talking about a court of law. We're talking about in the court of persuasion and influence. As soon as someone says, like I said, why have you never denied murdering Tammy Smith? What the fuck? I didn't murder her. Oh, okay. Are you sure?
That's interesting. Now, you said it that way.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you said that. Are you sure? Maybe you just drove the guy who shot her or murdered her. Like, see, the point is like, now I'm immediately associating you with murder. Whereas if you say, I don't know, why haven't you denied raping your son? Then it's like, what? Now I've stopped thinking, the people stop thinking about you as a murderer, and it's a different frame, right? And so like the book is about a lot of things, but that's one of the big things. And the way that he looks at frames in therapy is really kind of fucking brilliant, actually.
Do you make your bed?
Of course not. Don't talk crazy. Fuck would I do that? That's nonsense. I'm not in the military.
Yeah. I'm surprised very few guests make their beds.
Because we're entrepreneurs and creatives. We have shit to do.
Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
No, we covered a lot of cool stuff.
Awesome. Do you have a final message for all of our listeners who are trying to carve out success by their own definition?
Yes. One of my favorite Abraham Lincoln quotes is if I have 5 hours, it's something like, I'm probably paraphrasing. If I have 5 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. If you are looking to find success your own way, understand super fucking clear what success is to you. You should spend a lot of time clearly nailing that down and defining that. Because once you have a clear picture, is like, oh, I'd like to, it's not like, I just kind of like to do stuff. And no. It's, I want this income. I want this lifestyle. I want this set of relationships and friends. I want whatever. then once you have a clear, measurable set of goals that essentially that are earmarks of success for you, then you can go get them. It's really easy to go achieve specific results. It's really hard to chase a vague and transient sense of something.
Mm-hmm. And where can our listeners find more of you?
Bookinabox.com or tuckermax.me. You mentioned the other blog too. Either one.
Great. I'd like to recommend to them to download the ebook on bookinabox.com. Actually, if they're interested in writing a book, whether they use Book in a Box or not, it really breaks down the process very well with positioning and everything in a way that it's one of the best resources that I've found.
Yep. You can get it for free on my website, bookinabox.com/book or books. And or it's on Amazon for like $5.
Great. All right. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Tucker. I think it'll be really useful for a lot of our listeners. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Glad to be here.
So there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that interview. An important thing to mention about Book in a Box is that it started sort of accidentally. Tucker was on a podcast. I believe it was the Lewis Howes podcast. He mentioned the idea. Next thing you knew, he had a ton of clients. This is a theme that you often see with successful businesses. They kind of happen accidentally. For a relevant story, see Nick Gray on episode 11 to hear how these quirky museum tours he was giving to his friends for free eventually grew into a business. And before I go, I've got to ask, do you like books? If you do, I'd love to send you my book recommendations. About 90% of them will be nonfiction on subjects spanning from biographies to neuroscience. Just go to cadavy.net/reading, sign up, and you'll get my first set of book recommendations right away. You'll be supporting the show if you buy any of those books through the links in the email. This has been Love Your Work, and I'm David Cadavy. The theme music for the show is See in You, performed by the Album Leaf, courtesy of Sub Pop Records. Love Your Work is a production of Cadavy Inc.